intervention or a service that helps people mend some of the difficulties of their divorce, helps them feel like they can communicate better, helps them feel, gosh, we really can work together as a team. One of the unintended consequences of that is that people start wondering, well, I wonder why we're getting divorced. It's not a one-to-one, but when you start getting people...
How does that manifest itself, and then later, when the people's behavior? The longing and regret. People who are high in longing and regret are much more likely to be depressed 12 years later. So here we have an intervention that took place almost a decade before, associated with causing people, so experimental, causing people to feel more regret and longing, and then these people are the ones who are more likely to be depressed later on. So we describe this, this is not something that mediators like to hear. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily a bad outcome, but it's an unintended outcome. But I think it's one people should be aware of
exactly.
when they're doing it. I think that's something which is
Yeah.
important to do. In fact, how do we deal with how do you deal with that unintended consequences of mediation?
Well, I think that one of the most important things that people can do is really making sure that parents understand that they're recasting their relationship, and so that they're really changing their relationship from being partners, from being partners in terms of romantic partners, to being parents together. And they're moving from having a love relationship to having more of a business relationship. And if parents get that idea, then the boundaries between what their relationship is are not so blurred. I think that's part of the problem.
I guess the other question I have that comes to my mind when we're talking about is, if this is the case with mediation, I'm not sure you exactly studied this, maybe you did, what were some of the unintended consequences? Maybe being somewhat depressed after doing mediation may be bad, but are some of the things that happen in an adversary or more traditional case, there must be some emotional consequences to that as well.
Very much. So let me give you an example of that. So in this particular study, though, remember, we're comparing to litigation. So that's unique to mediation. But one of the things that we found most interesting was that the whole idea of mediation was premised on this on the principle that two people could come out of the mediation experience feeling like they both won something, right? I didn't lose.
That's classically referred to as the win-win situation.
It's a win-win situation, and game theory is the idea behind it, right? So what we did was we looked at the correlations between people saying, so basically the relationship between you won what you wanted and you lost. And for people who were in mediation, they always felt like winning was associated with satisfaction, and they felt very good. In litigation, the more you won, the more the other person lost. So it was an exact confirmation of that. And people who were, when there was a win-lose dynamic, there was always more dissatisfaction. So this idea that there's some empirical basis for this idea of win-lose dynamics. And I think
is there any way that you've discovered to get through a divorce without some kind of negative emotional...
No, I don't think so. The idea here, one of our ideas, and this, I know you had Frank Williams as a guest, and I think their divorce recovery program is really quite incredible. One of the ideas, we think of some of the things that we would like to do as informing prevention of divorce-related distress. And what that means is basically, we're not trying to prevent divorce. I think that is there are our own series of programs dedicated to doing that, and they're very important. What we're trying to do is prevent people from having a divorce that ends up being a major depressive episode that persists for a long time and becomes a chronic illness. So I think there's pretty good evidence that for about 5 to 10% of people, divorce can be the defining experience of their lives. And I don't mean just the most significant. I mean an experience that radically alters the trajectory that they're on in terms of the way they're moving through life. And they have a depressive episode, and this is just, makes going to work very difficult. And when they start, struggling at work, they lose their job. And when they lose their job, they don't have money So it really alters the trajectory.
And a lot of the public who are watching the show, I think, are going to be interested in this. And always like to bring this back sort of to the practical side of it, which is, so people really, it seems to me, anybody going through a divorce, whether it's adversary or mediated or something else, should probably be seeing some kind of a therapist or somebody to help them through some of the bumps in the road or some of the emotional things, just or to do that. Or
I disagree. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
No, I'm just suggesting what do people do in order to avoid, the train wreck?
Right. Well, first of all, I think there's a very, very natural propensity for human resilience. That's doing well in the face of very difficult experiences. And I think there are, I'm going to say this and sound like a self-hating clinical psychologist, but I think there are a fair amount of clinical psychologists who actually can make things worse. And it's based on a very traditional idea in clinical psychology that there is grief work to be done, and that if you don't do the proper grief work according to certain standards, right, you need to really get the emotional experience out, and that you're doomed to a worse outcome or a poor outcome later on. This is just not the case. There have been really interesting studies on the topic of bereavement and adjusting to partner death. And these studies have shown that most people do very well without any kind of grief therapy or counseling. So grief is a natural human experience, and it's totally normative.
So, we're getting back to the practical. Somebody's getting divorced.
Yeah.
And they're seeing that they've been mediated in the situation, and would they just they should be conscious that this is a possibility?
Absolutely right. So they should spend time just sort of having their experience and waiting to see what's going on. I think the normal course of these things is probably close to 6 months to a year, up to 2 years. So you can be feeling like total crap every day for 6 months, but you're able to go to work. You take care of your kids, you're involved.
But once again, it's almost like it's like the death of a parent or death of somebody too, that you're going to be upset, you're going to be depressed or upset about it, and then eventually as time goes by, it's going to get better.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a very good way to think about it.
So the awareness of it is the important factor, that no matter how you get divorced, you're going to go through some emotional issues, and you have to be prepared to deal with those, and just not see the divorce as the end of the situation, but the beginning of some new situations.
Very much. There are some people who get divorced and they feel like a very big burden has been lifted. I mean, it is a positive experience for them. I think they're in the minority, but there are people who feel that way. So for the issue here, just in tracking it, though, is to know when it's time to go see someone. And I think that's a very important.
Do you have any suggestions or advice on how somebody would know that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we think about are the do's and don'ts of recovery, right? And if you find yourself doing more of the don'ts, and here are the things like drinking a lot, drugs, bouncing around in relationships, if you really notice that you're having very persistent sleep problems. So sleeping is something that we've honed in on as being really critical to adjustment for a couple of reasons. Now, sleep can be totally turned upside down from a divorce. You just have constant intrusive thoughts, you can't lie, and that's normative. But over time, regulating sleep is important for two reasons. The first is that we're just better able to handle our emotions when we have slept well, and so getting a handle on that is very important. So doing things to promote good sleep quality is very important. But the other thing is that changes in sleep and periods of persistent insomnia, there is very clear, can be leading indicators. And what that means is that they can be markers that a depressive episode is coming.
So people should watch for these kind of things, and when they see that coming, then they realize they may not be able to handle it all themselves.
Yeah, very much, yeah. So I think that's
that's good.
Yeah.
Do you notice any differences between men and women in some of these emotional
Well, so there's... Yeah, we do notice some things. We haven't studied it so well with respect to divorce right now. In our studies, we have the wherewithal to do that, but we haven't gotten there. In our studies of non-marital breakups, which may not be the best analog here, but you have people who've had a love relationship and they've just broken up, and these are people in their early 20s. It's for some of them very significant experience. It was their first real